cross-pollination for me and what it really means, it's a glimpse into the future. And if you could look a year, 2, 5 years ahead of where your industry's going, you have
Hmm.
this gigantic cheat code on what everyone else in your industry is doing. And the people who are the most successful and the smartest are people looking for those edges, for that sort of anything they can do to get a glimpse of what's coming so that they can begin to react and prepare for it. And that is 100% what I learned just by like watching you. I think the thing that really stood out to me when you and I first met, you have this incredible ability to take something that is in the gaming world and make it relevant to the rest of the business and to kind of bring them along. And I'm really excited just for this discussion because although, there are probably not a whole lot of gamers in the outdoor space, everybody should be listening to everything that you have to say because this is a glimpse into the future of the outdoor industry, and it's probably not the place that a lot of people are looking. I think that's fair.
Oh, that's completely fair. I think most of the listeners right now are sitting there being like, "Why? What is this guy? Where's he from? What's he doing on this podcast?" And it's exactly that. It's the fascinating thing about that pollination is that when you're when you're an industry expert and you're head down in your space, the game is always iteration. How do you make it a little bit better? How do you outmaneuver your competition? And you're all kind of playing the same game, but to really find innovation, it may exist in a place that your competition isn't looking, and it's going to be found in another industry. It's going to be found in another high performance space with a lot of competition that are doing things that you can pull from. But oftentimes you get that big data dump and you have absolutely no idea how to separate the signal from the noise. And I think that's what we found at Red Bull was, when we were working together, a lot of people had, been at Red Bull and gaming and kind of failed or hit that wall, or when they try to go out and communicate, it just becomes this, I don't understand the space gaming. What does that have to do with me? What does that have to do with downhill alpine? What does that have to do with F1? What does that have to do with snowboarding? I don't get it. There's nothing I can learn here. And the language is weird. All these terms are strange. I don't get it. I tried to watch an esport. I don't know what's going on. This is all very, very confusing. I don't like it. It's not for me. And this treasure trove of information and knowledge then goes away. And what I found the best way to do it is you need to take the two spaces in the playgrounds and find the common denominator. And that may just be passion. I remember bringing some people out to an esport. We were watching League of Legends, and they're not gamers. They have no idea what's going on. And they're looking at the screen and listening to the call outs and the shoutcasters and just, it's all these confusing terms and things going on. And I could sit there for an hour and try to explain the game, and it's just going to be eyes glossing over. No idea. I said, don't pay attention to the screen. Look at everyone watching. Look how excited they're getting. Look how passionate they are. Look at how they're wearing jerseys to the teams and yelling about the players. You understand that. You understand marketing to passion. You understand, why people go to events. You understand that look. When somebody jumps up and screams and just is losing it as a fan, that all makes sense to you. So you're seeing community. You're seeing passionate engagement. And you know what to do with that. You got to dig in. You need to validate their passion. You got to meet them where they are, and you got to build something that they find really interesting. And all the rest is just, it becomes a mad lib of just filling in the blanks, and then you bring in an outside expert to help make sure that it stays credible. But you have your 80% there, and that helped me really bridge the gap when dealing with these other experts, in their field that have. The first step into gaming was one of the hardest things, and finding that bridge. And something else that you said, which was really interesting, was about, seeing the future. Every consumer out there, when I was growing up, when we were growing up, it was like gamers are over here, and then, the rest of the people are over here. Now, gaming is just media. It's as ubiquitous as movies or music. And so the entire population coming up, like 25 and younger, gaming is just part of their background noise, part of their media. It's part of how they consume culture. And if you don't have an understanding of how that consumer is interfacing with their world, you're going to have a pretty significant gap in meeting them where they are, just as if you were making outdoor apparel and you had no concept of music or how music interfaced with snowboarding. Could you be a successful snowboard company and not understand the music scene that influenced the space?
Wow, that's interesting to put it in that perspective. I think one of the key awakenings for me as a marketer, I was working with Grand Pooh Bear, who, you kind of connected us together. And in one day, he did a fundraiser for Wings for Life, and he raised $100,000 in a single day. At the same time, all of the other Red Bull athletes, Jamie O'Brien, Lindsey Vonn, Travis Rice, I mean, you name it, the biggest names, athletes just at the top of their game in every other category had offered up, signed boards or signed helmets or, whatever else, merch, basically. And they were, I think the highest bid for some of that other stuff was like, I don't know, $1,500, $2,000. I think they made like 10 grand while Pooh Bear was just doing his thing, making 10x that. And I realized in that moment, if you could take the essence of how he's essentially marshaled his audience to support the things that he cares about, if you could take that and apply that to an athlete in another sport, that athlete would be unstoppable. And that was the inflection point for me, at least, where I got my athletes together and said, all right, the way forward is for you to build a community through content. And it can be a podcast, it can be YouTube, it can be doubling down on some of your other social stuff, but you have to focus on building a community if you truly want to be successful in the long term. And that was the number one lesson that I learned. People in the gaming space are masters at building community through content.
It's true. It's gaming and community, community has been baked into the foundation within gaming. A little history about that. From the very beginning when games were being made, almost every single game will have like a forum, and this is going way back, right? And the community will be in there and they'll be commenting and giving feedback directly to the devs as things are changing. And that's the beauty of software. It can be iterative and it can grow in that space. And so having the community at the center point, of ideation and having community with a seat at the table has been a part of gaming from the very beginning. And so when content creation started blowing up, a lot of it was gaming first. A lot of people, and this may actually be new to a few people listening, but Twitch, which is a live streaming service for gaming, and they're expanding out, started off in I think like 2007 as Justin TV. And Justin TV was about live streaming. I mean, if you remember that term, it was all about 24/7 just live casting. And they spun up a side thing called Twitch. They're like, actually, we want to watch some StarCraft replays. And that suddenly started growing and growing and took over the entire business, dwarfed it. Justin TV goes away, and then it just expanded out. And so what that did was it gave those creators, those players, a chance to directly connect with their audience. And when you think about that, when you think about your athletes, they're out there, they're charging, they're best in the world, grinding out and producing, what they do. But largely they get their eyeballs, how they make their money through sponsorships, through podiums, through placement, and through content that is largely on the brand side. And what these tools have done is it puts the athlete in the driver's seat. So Grand Pooh Bear, nowhere near the size of some of the athletes that you were mentioning, but every day for like 6 hours a day has a direct conversation with his community where they're chatting, they're communicating every single day. So when he goes to his community and has an ask saying, hey, this is something I'm passionate about, they know him and they're more willing to give and to be on that journey with him because he is a fixture in their world, 5 days a week. Whereas I may see somebody who, I'm a huge fan of, at the X Games, or at these big moments where they come in, where they pop off, or I'll see a curated, a high quality piece on Instagram that is produced at a content session, that Burton put on, or that Red Bull put on, or one of these moments, right? And it completely changes the dynamic of the relationship. It gaming has allowed for the third party, the middleman, to be removed and to have that one-on-one in that building.
It's interesting watching the athletes who did follow in this path. I remember Payson McElvin is a mountain biker and started a podcast based on some of the gentle push that we gave him at Red Bull. And I'll never forget the first time he went to a race after he started his podcast. He called me afterwards. He was like, dude, I was in like 4th place and people were cheering harder for me than the guy in first. And exactly what you said, content puts the athlete in the driver's seat. There's no person in between. They're not reliant on a brand to tell their story for them. They are able to connect with the community. And, in my experience with Super Rider, it's actually allowed me to have way more control, and it's opened me up to new opportunities that I never would have had any other way, because I'm essentially demonstrating my expertise on the internet.
It shifts the context, right? If all of your content goes through your brands, your sponsors, it will always be through that context, right? And it shifts your context of your performance with your community, and it connects that. And I see you going through a similar transition right now, is with your audience. You're shifting the context from instructional to personality. It is, you are here to learn information, and I am just your humble guide in providing that information, to you want to experience this world and these things, in mountain biking through my eyes, and have me to provide that context. Is that something you're interested in? And, of course, you can go in and being algorithmic driven media, you are really making content for the algorithm. But the people who make it through that and really connect with it, you are going to have a stronger core base because they have that context. So yeah, it doesn't matter if you're first or fourth or going down. I now have context of that rider going down. I saw the training. I understand that they had an injury that they are recovering from. I am connected to that. I know that rider's dog because that dog rolls into the podcast, and now I have this familiarity with this individual. We saw the same effect on a macro level in F1 with Drive to Survive. Mm-hmm. Context, once it was provided, it goes from that. And that can be that we have the tools now to give that power to the athlete, for them to provide their own context of how they want their community to understand and see them, rather than through the lens of, the old gatekeepers of brand or magazines or different outlets that then provide their own context and their own narrative around that athlete.
You know what I want to do now, because we're talking about where I'm at right now, but again, why cross-pollination helps us see the future. You've actually had a chance to work with Ninja, with Ludwig. I mean, some of the biggest streamers on the planet. So what does it look like next? So you start the journey, you're making content, you build this community, but like, what are the other inflection points that then I guess I can look forward to, or I can drive towards? Like, what kinds of things should be next on the menu once I've got the audience built and I'm headed in that direction?
What I've been seeing is a shift from them becoming, their own little media company, and their own becoming a media mogul. And so largely a lot of the, media, legacy media, print, and, is starting to die because of this influencer run media. Where they're moving to next is product. And they are starting to build their own brands and starting to build their own products and starting to build their own services. And that then is going to enter a whole new area of new ground that neither party has been in before. And that completely is going to upend the entire sponsorship model. Because what happens when, as an outdoor company, I'm sponsoring, this mountain biker, and they come out with an apparel line. or they start making their own gloves. That's not too hard to do, you know, or find a white label and start building their own shoes. And so suddenly my advocate and my gateway to the community becomes a competitor of sorts. And that's the big shift that's happening now, and that we've been seeing. And so right now, a lot of the content creators are in. They have a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like they have a product, you know, they'll make like a drink, or shirts or something, right? A side product, but they also want to be that media outlet. And it's also changing the relationship with their audience, because all of a sudden it's, hey, you are the advocate to this playground and giving me the world through your eyes, and I trust you, but now you're selling me this product, and so I don't know, is this genuine? And you're seeing this all over the place as these YouTubers and these content creators are trying to shift into being business owners and running a product centric business instead of a content media centric business. And so that's the big shift that's happening, in this space. And that's where I think the outdoor space really should be paying attention to this and getting out in front of it, because either A, you can more effectively integrate your athletes into your product line and into your company, and make them a part of the company rather than a billboard. Or just giving them, hey, here's a product, you had this design, and out you go. But really understanding that this is the big shift, and B, athletes are starting to wake up and realize, like, oh wait, I have the power. I'm the gatekeeper now. I'm the media company.
Yeah.
And the whole dynamic has been shifting.
Interesting. That's fascinating to think about. You and I were talking a while back about this idea of like value creation and value extraction, right? When it comes to the content itself, and trying to hold off on the value extraction as long as possible to really build the audience to the size that it has to be. I mean, I think if the product is good enough, it is still a bit of value creation, right? And that's like the hard milestone to hit. Like, how do you get to the point where you actually are making something that's even better than the company that's doing it full time? That's
Right.
that's a big leap for someone who's been on a content treadmill for the last 5 or 6 years to now all of a sudden have the best product in the category.
Well, yeah, I think a product that a lot of people are going to be familiar with is Prime. And so you have KSI, Logan Paul. I mean, they didn't know anything about drinks. You have this company that comes in and says, hey, we're going to build this product, build it with you. You're going to be the front runners. You are going to inform on this. You're going to be stakeholders and owners of it, and you're going to be the primary marketing arm. So we'll handle the manufacturing, we'll handle the logistics, we'll handle all of that stuff that you don't need to know, but you effectively become our marketing department. And that became very, very successful. And so those are kind of the models that are happening now, where very smart entrepreneurs are coming in. They're partnering with content creators saying, yeah, you don't need to know operations and logistics. I know that. I can set up all of that stuff. I can handle the sourcing. I can handle the distribution. I need you to be my marketing arm. And that then becomes the relationship that is being built out with these content creators. And it's beverages, it's food, it's hardware, it's software apps, it's publishing games, it's all over the place. And that movement is the next step of empowered athletes when they discover their voice and that they own the audience, not necessarily the brand. That will be the next thing. So the outdoor industry, I don't think, is going to really encounter that aggressively for a few years, because they're still in the growing stage around the empowerment of the athletes.
Yeah, in outdoor specifically, you could almost count on one hand the amount of content creators that are serious about, developing their brands. And a lot of people are sort of caught on this treadmill of just making content. And it is hard. It's a lot of effort, especially for outdoor stuff, because you have to be out, you have to deal with weather, you have to deal with, conditions and everything to actually make whatever content that you're going to make. So the amount of time that goes into each one can be semi-prohibitive, but the people who are able to do it are starting to see the light on what could be next. And I think that's the biggest thing that most people are struggling with right now, is being able to transition from being a content creator to actually building a business. And in fact, one of our previous podcasts, we we were asking ourselves, like, what is the actual business that we're running here? Because views and YouTube AdSense is not enough at this
Right.
point to really have a real business and have employees and go from there. You have to be doing other stuff, and sponsorship is sort of covered up until this point, but to
Mhm.
really grow it into an actual business. Our friend Eric Lagerstrom was just saying, we have this curse of knowledge where like we know how to do the editing and we know how we're the experts on camera, and we're not hiring other people to do it. We're just doing it ourselves. But I wonder if you had to really start it like a business, how you might operate separately or it just with a completely different approach. But yeah, the curse, I guess.
No, the curse of knowledge is real, and I think that harkens back to our original point of the difficulties of cross pollinating between playgrounds. Is you will have two people with that curse, and being able to be aware of the curse of knowledge that you're bringing to the table, and then really finding that a way to bridge that. It is something that really keeps people in their lane, especially because when they go outside of their lane, there's almost this, oh, what are you talking about? I don't understand, and that lack of connection starts to really become a problem.
Yeah.
You don't
What
know what you don't know.
let's go back to the whole brand thing, because like I said in the beginning of the pod, it's you've done such an amazing job of helping brands understand what you do, how you do, and how to kind of think ahead. And I think, like I said, at Red Bull, you were there, leading the gaming effort, but your downstream effect and what the rest of the organization pulled from that was, I mean, yeah, there are multiple athletes making a full-time income based off of the information that we pulled
I love
from
that.
you and your team. So thank you. But also, like, what do brands do? I mean, it sounds like athletes are just coming for them, but obviously there is sort of this symbiotic nature between athletes and brands, and there are, it's not just all doom and gloom for brands out there.
No, 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 no. It's definitely not. It's exciting because what the takeaway there is that, you know, it's not that the athletes are coming for them, right? It's that you now have a better educated partner out there doing the thing. The most valuable person to a brand is going to be a highly educated athlete who understands content, who understands their brand, who understands the product and what makes a product successful in the marketplace. There's so many athletes out there where 100% of their mind is focused on winning and perfecting their craft. And it's difficult for them to take a step out and see the other aspects and what they need to master. And it's very simple. I'm going to go do a thing. It's going to be the best in the world. I'm going to get this amount of eyeballs. You're going to slap a logo here. Those eyeballs become you via me. End of transaction. And the more that a brand can, up level and educate their athletes. So just hearing that athletes, just from our conversations or any of that knowledge, is growing. That's step one. A brand always should be investing in their athletes and making them more robust, making them better content creators, encouraging that. And then making their success in those spaces, the brand's success. And that's always been, and that's baked into, the Red Bull philosophy, but always invest in the athlete and just understand where that athlete's trajectory is going to be in the next 5 to 10 years, what that space is going to look like. And the takeaway on the brand side is make sure you have the people, make sure you have the infrastructure, make sure you have the right reporting permissions and internal structure so things don't get bogged down, where you will be able to create an environment where that athlete's able to find success with you, rather than being in a position where it's, if I'm going to continue on the success trajectory of building my own brand, I need to leave this partner because they are a hindrance. And that's where the brands get left in the dust. And that's where it becomes an adversarial relationship. You need to make sure that your company is being built in a way to foster success of those athletes in the ways that they need to. Are you providing content creation? Are you providing facilities where they can get access to that? Are you, do you have people who understand building communities and being able to invest and to train that athlete so that they can make sure that their community is also your community? all of those things. You have to invest in the success of the athlete.
What do you think was the most successful, or, maybe not the most, but give me an example of something from Red Bull where you were investing in the athlete? Could have been, an event. It could have been really anything. I would be really curious of the different tactics that you use when it comes to gaming to really deliver that for an athlete.
Yeah, there's a few ways, and I think we pulled a lot from just the general acumen of athlete marketing. And so one of the more successful ways that we found was introducing high performance to our competitive players. And what that allowed for them to do is, I mean, there's mountains of evidence that, the healthier you are, the better cognitive processing you have, you're able to stay focused for a longer period of time, all of that stuff. It's all interconnected. And blending those worlds became really successful. And it taught our players and our competitors the value of what a high performance fitness organization, having, PT, having these people, nutritionists dedicated to you and your success, what it can do for their craft. But also, and this is where it got really interesting, is the high performance group learning from the gamers that we brought in. Because they would come in and they would go, okay, so here's a reaction test and let's see how you do. And they'd break the system. And they'd be like, I don't. They had a faster reaction time than F1, the F1 drivers. They had better object tracking, than any other athlete tested. And these things like, whoa, okay, I didn't realize that these people coming in had a best in class skill and training regimen that we could potentially take and grow the other spaces. And that's where that became kind of that, oh, this is a symbiotic relationship. Not only can I improve your world, but you can improve ours. And I think that connection was a big aha moment. And everyone that I've seen kind of leave that program and go off to other things has really said, no one was paying attention to this. No one saw that this world over here that people don't understand and just kind of write off has been perfecting specific skill sets that are actually valuable to this area. And what we found was, I mean, the athletes know. I mean, most of some of the biggest gamers on the Red Bull roster are their F1 drivers. Yeah. So I think that connection of high performance was a big aha moment that I think was a really good success story.
It's interesting to think about using athletes as a way to inform the business. Of course, there's a well-worn path of athletes testing product and, giving them feedback of, oh, this is what this feels like, or, I'd love to see this different, or whatever. But being able to inform other parts of the business based on their specialties. And one thing you and I have talked about in the past on the phone is just how, from a content creator standpoint, content can actually, for a brand, be a testing ground, right? Where you can source information from the actual audience directly and kind of turn that into something usable for the brand itself. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I think whenever you're making content, right, you're having a conversation with your community, you're having a conversation with your audience. And I think so often they feel that you need to, the brand gets in this state of, what do I want to say? It's very, very important what I want to say, what I need to communicate. And I think that is the wrong approach, because that then doesn't necessarily give you actionable information to really inform where you need to be. It should be, in my opinion, the content creation process is, what does the audience want to hear, first and foremost? And the second question, so unpacking that, is, of course, the type of content they want to engage with, even down to the format. Do they want, like 30-second, quick TikToks? Do they want long form? What are they talking about? What is the content they're consuming? What are they interested in sharing? The second is, of course, how do they want to hear it? And so that gets into like distribution, the type of quality, all of that. And then after you've laid that out, you've really started this, and this is kind of like design thinking 101. you really have that, then the question is asked, okay, what do we want to say? And if you do those first two steps correctly, you're going to create an environment where the data you get back is going to be useful, because then you can see, okay, these comments, are this engagement is genuine. Now I understand that they're not interested in this narrative, or this product isn't landing, or we've done it correctly. We've created an environment of communal feedback where they're going to talk amongst themselves. That's the value. That's what we want to see, because they're going to be honest and they're going to, communicate that. And the second, when you update your content constantly, the community feels that you're there, you're present, they have an ear, and will suddenly start to become more vocal. They don't want to shout in an empty room. They want to talk amongst themselves. They want to communicate with you if you're listening as a brand. And the way that you show that is by having these conversations, is by creating content that isn't just an ad and not selling, and here's our newest product and isn't it so cool, and here's a sick, 3D trailer, and isn't this awesome. It's not that. It's having genuine conversations with them via content, that they feel, oh, they're present, they're in the community, they're here with us. Now I feel that I should be giving more accurate and open feedback that is going to perhaps be listened to or actually be received.
I think also listening to the feedback and and adapting it to what you're actually working on, right? Like that's just as important. Like, what's the use of doing all that if you're not actually going to complete the loop and put that into the next iteration of whatever it is?
And that's where we get into company structure, right? It used to be the old adage, oh, the social media intern, goes off and they're the last part of the funnel where every decision, and then it's handed over to the lowest ranking individual of the company to, put it on the internet. And that person, I think a lot of companies are learning that, are incredibly important, because if they say the wrong thing, they can absolutely tank your company for the next, 48, 72 hours. But also, that's the person having the conversation. That's the person who is tied in. And companies that don't structure that feedback loop, where they put that under, say, comms, right, or PR, communication, where it's, we hand you a fully fledged idea, product, go out and communicate it, but instead build it where they have a strong pipeline into product and design and connecting it in with their engineers and their designers. They're going to find the most success, because you're absolutely right. You can sit there and generate all this community data all you want, but if there is no feedback loop and it's not getting to the right people in your company in a way that makes sense, where you can separate the signal to noise, then you're missing out on a ton of value of having that person at the design table who is exactly who you want to be hearing from, filtered via context, because of course, community is just going to be a loud noise. You have to be able to contextualize that. So getting into context of feedback is also important. That's a whole other thing. But that company structure is going to be very, very important with how that feedback loop is structured.
That is such a banger for anybody in the outdoor brand world, because so many times I see the social media team being super downstream of product development, of athletes, of everything else. It's just kind of like this knee jerk, like, yeah, put this on the internet. And you're totally right that role is so vital to essentially being the connection point, and why athletes are important too. Same thing. They are the connection point to a community that's been built up.
They're your community
around.
managers.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's not nothing. Those are the people who become the word of mouth. Like, that is how you spread word of mouth around anything. And the more effective that person is at rallying that community, the more successful your business is downstream of them, not the other way around.
And that's what gaming does really well, is, when the designers are in the room, and when they're building out the next stretch of what they're working on, they'll bring in the community department. And notice I say department. It is a full, robust group out there that is a two-way street. It's communication. It's not broadcast. It's an interactive media, so of course they think like that, but they're at the table of design. They're the ones who are there. The senior director, VP of community, who's able to have that business acumen to be able to translate that world, all that data that they're getting from their managers, their specialists, into something actionable for the team that they're talking to. They have a seat at that table. And that's incredibly important, to have that two-way street with your audience, with your community, because they're going to be the ones that go out and advocate. It's not going to be the magazines. It's not going to be the broadcast. It's not going to be the advertising. It's going to be your buddy in the space that you know, that you call up and say, hey, what should I be riding? You know, what gear? You know, I'm getting better. I'm looking to actually drop some money into the space. What should I be doing? There's too many brands. I don't understand it. And that word of mouth, right? You know, old Red Bull, you know, that is critical. So what are you doing to foster that, and to also make sure that they are in the room when you are designing your next product?
Here's an interesting question on exactly that. Like, at Red Bull, we had access to a pretty robust team that was pretty dialed in, and we had a well-worn machine at that, you know, for a while there. Who is the brand that you were looking at outside of Red Bull that you're like, man, they got it pretty dialed, they got it figured out? Is there anybody out there that you were kind of looking at, and what made them kind of stand out?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, you know, with the, you know, in the context of, you know, more outdoor. I honestly, since they are the topic du jour, what I found really interesting is what Nike is doing. And because they have always had this very focused on, you know, making sure we elevate and we celebrate our athletes, and to bring them in. And they've been doing a lot of interesting stuff in gaming. And they've been, you know, poking their head in and building some stuff for the community, and really starting to learn that space more effectively. And the difference that I've been seeing other companies go in to gaming, you know, is they'll see it as a channel. And what I mean by that is saying, oh, we're going to make a thing, and we're going to, you know, maybe throw an item in game and off and advertise. What Nike has been doing is they've been going into the community. They've been going into the culture and building and ideating, you know, limited edition products that the community will only understand. So they just released a Tekken shoe. And this is they understood, hey, sneakerheads are really prevalent in the fighting game community. Tekken is a fighting game like Street Fighter. There's a lot of passion here. This game is, you know, becoming really, really popular. And so we want to build something for the sneakerheads in this community that is a love letter to the thing they're passionate about. And it was great. And the community was like, this is amazing, because they're getting love from a massive company, but also that they are coming in and doing their due diligence to build within it. And I think that's, you know, that's amazing. Whereas, you know, and I'm not going to, this isn't any shade or anything, but I look at a different strategy with like North Face, where they did a collaboration with Gucci. And they said, how do we get this out there? You know, oh, we should, you know, the gamers should know about this. And so they pushed it out via Pokemon Go. And they said, okay, here, you know, here's some skins. And that's cool. But then where was the follow-up? It's not, and that's channel strategy thinking. And honestly, a lot of this stuff has to do with, did you hire an agency, then give them the instruction to go out and get impressions and eyeballs? Or are you approaching this from a community level? And I feel like Nike made the shift, especially around their whole dot swoosh and NFTs, and learning from community and then dialing that back and shifting. They're learning a lot of investing in the community and pulling that data from the roots up. Whereas I think a lot of other companies are still trying to figure out and path this.
That's so fascinating. And you think about it, like, they went into gaming with intention, and I think that applies everywhere. Wherever you're going to go, whatever you're trying to get done, it has to be intention and not just channel strategy, right? Like
100%. That goes back to what we were talking about earlier of extraction, you know, versus, you know, putting value in, right? And it's the same for a content creator of when you put in value, and then where's the output, where's the business, where's the quote unquote the harvest, you know, versus a brand. It's the same way. It's what are you doing, especially to such a community driven environment of gaming. And I think a lot of also people in the outdoor space don't understand how big gaming is. It's bigger than music and movies and television combined. So it is media, it is the whole thing, right? but it's an interactive media. And so it's not a passive media. So passive advertising, passive interaction doesn't work with this group. And so you have to put in value. You have to come in and say, how do we contribute? How do we put value into this space versus, ooh, there's a lot of money in the space. There's a lot of people. How do we extract value? How do we mine value from this? And that's a lot of the philosophies. Yet, if you asked any of these outdoor companies, hey, you're going to be, you're getting into trail running, or, you're into snow sports, what are you going to do about summer sports? They would be going in with absolute reverence and going in and learning the space and really doing their due diligence, because they have that understanding. It's comfortable. They understand that that's how you need to approach these spaces. And then they'll look at, gaming, and they'll dip a toe in, treat it as a channel, maybe not be as successful, and then just write it off. And you got to put the value in, you got to do the work.
Yeah, one would hope that they would enter in any sport with the same level of intention and reverence. I hope that happens for mountain biking. I mean, a lot of the outdoor brands are very invested in a lot of places, and mountain biking is sort of similar to where we're not getting the same kind of love.
Yeah. And it's, I'll say this also, going off about gaming and kind of demystifying it. I think, especially if you haven't had any exposure to what that audience is, you expect all of the people in gaming to be what they were 20 years ago. The gaming community I grew up in, and it's not. They're all active, they're all very fitness focused. Some of the biggest crossover that we saw with gaming is fitness and outdoor activity. You want to have that. And so gaming is now a part of their life cycle, as much as any other media is. What was snowboarding and music together, what is skate and music that then, bridge that entire world, is now gaming. And so not seeing it as another, but seeing it part of the lifestyle and part of the life cycle of an athlete or your consumer. It's what they do. It's how they, it's how they connect. It's how they socialize. It's how they have their downtime. And then the outdoor company is their uptime, right? And that's their getting out and getting after it.
That's cool. We've been talking sort of through this whole conversation about cross-pollination and how it is a chance to kind of glimpse into the future. I would love to talk to you just a little bit about what the last couple years have been like in the gaming industry, because that's, again, a bit of a preview. We just saw that article about the end of Big Surf, where all these VCs ran into Surf, tried to buy and consolidate all these big companies, and then, basically everything kind of melted down as a result. What's it been like in gaming? I know there was like a big gold rush at one point, but could you just talk about the last couple of years and kind of what your side of the industry has learned? And I mean, all this stuff, it's like we're talking about gaming, but you can so easily draw the parallels to how this exists in the outdoor world. I don't know. I'd just love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, that was a great podcast that you guys did about what happens to a space when a ton of money pours into it, a lot of dumb money that they come in and they prospect, and then it didn't work out the way they thought it would, and what happens to the surf space, right? Or what happens to any of that. And we saw that very much in gaming on multiple tiers. With all the COVID lockdowns and all these industries going underwater, two industries exploded, right? One, everyone on this podcast is very familiar with, outdoor, because it was like, oh, I can get out in nature and be just fine. There's nothing more socially distanced than backpacking. And the other one that exploded was gaming. And a ton of money poured into competitive gaming, esports, into these gaming companies, huge investments in hardware. There's a massive hardware shortage of people buying up gaming GPUs, consoles. Nobody could buy a PS5, all of this, right? And all of a sudden, the industry just exploded. And so with that, you had a lot of dumb money come into the space as well. And it was the same deal. It was a lot of prospectors coming into a community and saying, okay, how can I extract value from this? And so it was a lot of VC, a ton of money came into esports. And after a year or two, they didn't quite get it right. They didn't do their due diligence. They didn't understand actually how the industry worked, where the value is, how the value exchange worked, basic things like who holds the rights to this and what rights can I actually monetize and leverage, or how do I even get a community to recognize this thing that I want them to look at. Going back to the old, the thing I said previously of it was all focused on what do we want to say and not doing the due diligence to really understand how this community actually consumed. And understanding that you're not walking into a gold rush, a new community, you're walking into a community with 25, 30 years of established ways of working that because it's new to you doesn't mean it's new to them. And there was a big pullback, right? There was a ton of dumb money thrown in. Streamers were getting signed to 25, $30 million contracts. The big famous one was Microsoft launched a gaming platform called Mixer. They signed Ninja for like 30 million to 2 years. The company ended up folding. Microsoft folded the division a year and a half in and had to pay out a 10-year contract. So, those streamers, they got paid, and there was, a lot of that happening. But as the waters receded back, that left a bit of, bitterness with the community of these companies. You weren't in it for real. It gave a lot of love to the companies who stayed in it, companies like Red Bull who go into a space and stay in and, put in the time. And it just shifted everything because so many business models that were then being projected into this type of money collapsed. And so a lot of esports companies went under. A lot of games, tanked. A lot of, monetization models that they expected, valuation of new software went down. So it created a whole upend of a ton of financial, which had tons of cascading effects. But yeah, when dumb money comes into a space, as you were talking about earlier, you got to be smart about it. You got to know what bag to take, when to keep it, when to invest in the community, what to spend on, because the ones that spent wrong, and gaming is going through huge layoffs, over the last year because of the overspends, because of the prospecting, because of, hey, actually this wasn't a 5-year runway, it was a 1-year runway. So it's been a lot of just, churn and upheaval.
So fascinating to think about. And it's difficult, right? When that money comes in, it's hard to say no. Mm-hmm. But I think it just comes down to the same thing we've been talking about of like pursuing things with intention, like do the right thing, do it in a way that's going to sustain the community, whether you have a ton of money or not. Just do the right things that are good. And I think that was something that really connected us at Red Bull, was just doing what needed to be done, regardless of if the water was high or low, just kind of maintaining that, is this good for everyone, not just the moment, right?
Right. And I think that's something that I found when I moved I was at a hardcore endemic gaming company, and then moved to Red Bull. I found so many parallels in the ways of thinking between the two, which I really liked. A big one is, as we know the rule, the bull doesn't speak. And what that kind of forces you to do as a marketer is you can't go out and get loud. You have to create something that makes the community, that makes your athletes, that makes the people get loud on your behalf. The coolest person in the room isn't the one talking about themselves. It's the person everyone else is talking about. And so if you're not producing something that gets people excited, there's that natural feedback where you can't say, oh, well, just come over the top, put a big advertising campaign, buy, and get people to talk about it. You have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, what are we going to do to actually produce something that's going to get people excited, because we don't have the easy lever of just throw money at the problem.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the same with you'll go through gaming companies all the time, and in every single byline it's player first, player centric, player, all of that, because it's always about that community. Because in gaming, the community holds all the power, whereas in other spaces the brands hold the power, and that's shifting. And that's where they need to be looking at gaming and saying, okay, the power dynamic is shifting. What do I need to learn as a company from these people who've been living in this space for the last 20 years in a community driven market rather than a brand and gatekeeper driven market?
Fascinating. What do you think the future is for gaming? You guys are ahead of us by a few years. So what are the things that you're looking at? What are the conversations that you're having right now?
Yeah, the big one is everything kind of shifting into so goes media, so goes gaming. So what happened to Blockbuster and DVDs? It's now everything is a streaming service. And so gaming is going the same way. They want you on a monthly subscription. They want you in these environments, these very long tail planning, areas. They're also a big move for consolidation. Everyone, has heard of Fortnite. And what Fortnite is doing, it's an always on game as a service where it's free to play, but then there's all these other monetization, cosmetics and things that you can buy and going into that. So that monetization model is really interesting. And I think we're seeing that now with hardware. I think there's a big move to how can we get you to subscribe to hardware. And I think we're going to start to see that in or when I say hardware, I'm speaking about consumer electronics. And then to actual physical hardware, performance outdoor hardware, that may be the case. We may start seeing more subscription models. We may start seeing that monetization model start to pull in, and what that's creating is a ease of entry and then monetization options within it, within gaming. And the second thing that I'm seeing a big thing of is these big companies. The budgets for these games are just ballooning and getting out of control, which is leaving a ton of opportunity for the smaller, for the indie, for the, for the mid tier to come in. And I feel like I'm seeing also that in outdoor, where the hell did Hoka come from, And I think that was kind of the question, Nike had to ask themselves, because these small, mid, very focused companies that aren't trying to be the everything to everyone are opening up all of these spaces. And so I think we're seeing that in a lot of areas. And that, again, speaks to the power dynamic that we're seeing shifting all over the place of traditional gatekeeping is going away, and community empowerment and decentralization of the narrative is starting to really grow.
There was so much in there that I want to dig into really quickly. First, can you just explain to me how hardware as a service actually works? Because that kind of blew my mind a little bit, that like a hard good could be something that you would subscribe to.
We're seeing that as the number one movement, right? Is how do we make devices smart? And if we can make a device smart, how much, how can we create that as a service? Peloton, right? It's an exercise bike. Well, not really. It's a platform. The hardware is just the access to the service. And it's the content. It's all of these things in that world. And so it's shifting the business model from the piece of hardware, the product in the center of the hub, more into a spoke. And so, of course, we're seeing this, with like cell phones, Apple. You can subscribe to an Apple device where you can go in and trade it in every year, and you just pay a monthly fee, and you'll always have the latest iPhone. That's the idea of subscribing to a piece of hardware.
Got it.
It's this planned obsolescence where you won't own anything. You will just subscribe to it, and you will always have the most updated piece of hardware, because really the hardware is just a means to an end, which is going to be this world, right? And outdoor is going to be the last, I think, to experience this, because the means to an end is the outdoors. That's the content. But you're going to see it with smart devices. You're going to see it with access to different areas. All of that. We may see that more with snow as Epic Pass grows and grows and grows. Do you really need the hardware, or can you just subscribe with your Epic Pass and have all your newest gear out there? And it's like demo days for all of that. It's all about subscribing to the hardware as a means to the content. And that then becomes the game, free to play, as we see already with gaming.
Yeah.
It's a very, very successful model. because it's no longer you purchase a thing and end of transaction, and I'll see you never if I did a good job on this hardware, or if I'll see you in 5 years, 10 years when you want to upgrade, to I'm going to see you every time for a little bit of money every month.
Genius. Genius. Wow. The idea of the Epic Pass and like you show up at the resort and your snowboard's ready to rip right out of the gate, just that makes a ton of sense. And you could start thinking about how that might work for a lot of different categories in the outdoor space. My brain is on fire right now. Let's also talk about really quickly before we switch into our BPC. You talked a little bit about AAA titles and indie titles, and just to explain for the audience, AAA
Yep.
is kind of like the big mainstream Call of
Your
Duty,
blockbusters.
right?
Yep.
Right, and indie is more of like maybe it's a smaller team that's just working on a one-off kind of game that's a little bit riskier title, maybe something that's a little obscure. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So exactly as you said, right? Indie, they're typically self-published. They'll do their marketing. It could be a team of like 5 people that put games out. There may be a game that people have heard of because it became really popular during lockdowns. Was Among Us, and this game was made by 3 people. It's a tiny little indie game, and then became one of the best-selling titles of the year. And so sometimes the upside, because that game cost nothing and it was made on pure passion, have those outlets of distribution. Whereas the AAA and the quadruple A, which is reserved for the huge budget ones, Grand Theft Auto 6, when that drops, it's going to be a quadruple A. Call of Duty. These are AAA games. These are games that you see everywhere. If you're seeing it on like a pack of chips, or you're seeing it when you walk into a Kroger, that's a AAA game. That's a game out of a massive publisher with a big marketing budget that either owns the studio or buys the rights to the studio. So very similar to movie and in music production, where you have the artist or the group that makes the product, and then the publisher will pick it up and just blow it out of the water. What's different is how easy it is to distribute and self-publish it is in gaming. And so the act of building a game is still expensive and difficult, but you can find your audience very effectively. And so the indie gaming scene has always been very alive and well, and has an opportunity to explode onto the scene, like what happened with Among Us. Whereas in movies, they still have the theaters, right? Or music, what was the radio stations, and now other means of gatekeeping. Those gatekeepers are still in place. And gaming, especially on the PC, allows for this innovation to blow up. And then what the big publishers do is, when they see this little game go out and create something and introduce a really interesting new way of doing things, they'll just take that, they'll piece it out and then build it into their next title because it's already been field tested, and integrate that into their big, new Call of Duty game or whichever, and pull those little game mechanics in that have been prototyped out by the indie community.
Interesting. We talked a lot about this with the idea of brands, the challenger brands kind of fit that same model of an indie title where they can try a little new technology, or they can put something else out there that resonates with a smaller community, and scratch out some pretty big success against a giant competitor.
Yeah, these big competitors are all of a sudden becoming fast follows to indie companies, which is strange, because typically you want to fast follow the giant in the industry, and instead they're becoming fast followers to these little minnows swimming around them.
Amazing, amazing. This is such a fascinating conversation, man. Every time we talk, I'm just blown away, and I'm taking little bits and pieces of like, wait, that's a preview of where we're headed, or this could be interesting to start thinking about. And I think a lot of the people listening to this pod probably haven't considered, a large majority of the stuff that we've talked about. And like we said at the beginning, there's a lot of like the brain turns off when they see gaming, and that's a huge mistake for a lot of people, because this is your chance to see into the future, and to just take a little bit of that essence can make a huge difference for some of these brands that are really trying to build and grow and develop. So,
And your consumer knows. I
yeah.
mean, that's the thing. Gaming is so prevalent now, and it's no longer an isolated playground. Gaming is culture, and so your consumer knows these things. And so
Yeah.
if your brand doesn't know these things, you're at a disadvantage to your consumer.
It's a great point. Amazing. Well, thank you for this. You are the guest, so I'm going to let you go first for our BPC, brand,
Yes.
product, content. What you got?
It's a little bit older, but I found it fascinating by how it came to market and the community response. We talked about it a little before, but Peloton and lane break specifically. I think Peloton realized that, oh, we're a content platform, we're a gaming controller, and I think that realization kind of was their light bulb moment of, we can do more than just fitness videos. We can use this thing, as this bike, as a very interesting way as a controller to gamify fitness. And the idea, and gamifying fitness isn't new. I mean, even on your Apple Watch, there's a gaming fitness category under workout. But the idea of, hey, we are going to gamify fitness in an actual interesting way, that this product that we make is actually a controller, it's an input device, that's really interesting. And I think they woke up to the fact that they are sitting on this thing that could potentially be even more engaging to their community than just the fitness and workout videos, that are going to elicit even more of a response of working out, staying on program, than just the social community pressure that they kind of have built into the product already. And gamification of fitness is something that is just fascinating to me, because there's so much you can learn from game design and how someone interacts with it, interactive media, that is applicable to outdoor and to fitness and to workout, because all that is translating all the data that you're generating and all the input that you're generating already, that is now being tracked by every smart device that you carry with you, into a really interesting format that's engaging and exciting, and all of the outputs, and to keep people going, and that little tiny dopamine hit, every 30 seconds, right? So I think what Peloton's doing with lane break is fascinating, and I love that, and I hope to see more of it.
I'm actually I'm actually obsessed with lane break. So I'm right there with you. I think it's so fun, and it's just a different way to approach fitness. And yeah, I feel like everybody at their core has some level of I want to win the game. I
Yep.
want to play the game. I want to have fun doing whatever it is I'm doing. And I think that's why gamification in general has been so successful across everything. And
And it's a simple indie game. I mean, it's audio surf.
yeah,
If you look up audio surf, right, that came out, old indie game of, going through lanes in music, that's what they did. I mean, that's the game. So there's so much to learn from the space that you can bring it into your product.
that's so cool. That's so cool. Amazing. All
All
right,
right, what about you? I want to hear yours.
all right, my BPC actually it's a film called Anytime, and it actually was a co-production with Red Bull. It was Ant Hill Films and Red Bull. It's available for free on Red Bull TV right now. But this is kind of, to me, I feel like the pendulum is always swinging, right? And like we talk about AAA and indie, there's been a lot of kind of indie content arriving on the internet from mountain bike creators and brands. And there used to be, every single year there'd be a mountain bike film called New World Disorder, and then this
Mm-hmm.
other brand came up called Ant Hill, and they started producing really high end mountain bike films. And in snow, there's the Warren Miller films. These are the big budget, big actual films. We're going to the ends of the earth to make these films happen, and it's the thing that everybody aspires to be in, and it's the can't miss movie of the season. And I feel like there's been a little bit of a lull in the outdoor industry for these films that just like everybody lines up and gets together. The AAA films.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime is exactly that for mountain biking. It's out for free. Red Bull is like the Medici family for the mountain bike world. They basically made everything. They've just funded all of this amazing art to be created. And I'm so thankful that, as an indie creator in mountain biking, like we're doing our job over here, but it's nice that there is like a tentpole film every couple years where you're
Yeah.
like, yes, this is it. So, and the fact that it's free to see is even better. It's incredible. I mean, literally they go to the ends of the earth to ride bikes, and I just love everything about it.
All right. I'm putting that into the queue. I love North of Nightfall, so I just that idea of adventure and all that for downhill.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this. I think a lot of people are going to get a ton out of this conversation, and yeah, thank you again for joining and having this conversation, and for everything
Absolutely.
that you and your team have done to help me and all of my athletes get to where we are. I mean, it can't be overstated.
I love talking about this stuff. You know that, man. Anytime you call, I'll just pontificate. So I always appreciate it.